Royal Guard Freeze. After Princess Charlotte collapses bleeding and speaks Camilla's son's name. It was one of those mornings when the air felt crisp and alive, yet there was a quiet tension that seemed to hang over the palace grounds. Inside the grand halls, preparations for a very important royal event were underway. Servants bustled quietly through the corridors, carrying trays of silver tea sets, arranging flowers, and polishing golden candelabras that had seen centuries of royal gatherings. Every corner of the palace was alive with a strange mix of excitement and duty. Princess Charlotte, the young royal, was in her private chambers, getting ready for the day. She moved gracefully, her steps light yet careful, as if she knew that she had to appear perfect at every moment. Her dress, a delicate creation of silk and lace, shimmered softly in the morning light. The dress had been chosen with care, and every tiny detail was arranged by her attendants to ensure it would sit just right. Charlotte's hair was done in gentle curls, pinned neatly so it would stay perfect throughout the day. She looked like a picture of elegance, but beneath her composed exterior, a faint weariness tugged at her. Charlotte's close aide noticed the subtle signs first. Her cheeks were paler than usual, and there was a slight tremor in her hand when she lifted a teacup. The aide, a kind woman who had known Charlotte since she was a child, leaned slightly closer, concerned. "Are you feeling well, Your Highness?" she asked softly. Charlotte smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm fine," she whispered. "Just a little tired, that's all." She sipped her tea, but it did little to calm the flutter in her stomach. Meanwhile, outside the private chambers, the royal guards stood silently at attention. They were dressed in their traditional uniforms, red coats bright and polished, black trousers crisp, and their hats tall and imposing. Each guard's face was calm and expressionless, their eyes straight ahead, showing no hint of emotion. These men and women were trained to maintain perfect composure, to never flinch no matter what happened around them. Today, they were part of an event that would be remembered for its grandeur, a ceremonial occasion that demanded flawless discipline and dignity. The palace corridors echoed with the soft click of shoes and the hushed murmurs of attendants. Every person seemed to move with a purpose, as if they were all parts of a giant, intricate clock. Princess Charlotte stepped out of her chambers, her hands held lightly together, her eyes scanning the crowd of staff, visiting dignitaries and family members. She gave a small, polite wave, acknowledging the staff who bowed or curtsied respectfully. Her smile was warm, practiced, and perfect for the public eye. But behind that smile, a subtle discomfort lingered. Charlotte was not alone. Her younger cousins played nearby, their laughter ringing out like little bells in the grand halls. They chased one another in playful games, unaware of the weight of royal expectation that rested on their older cousin. Charlotte watched them for a moment, a faint, tired smile crossing her lips. She had always loved these little moments, where life felt almost normal despite the royal surroundings. But today, even these simple joys felt slightly distant. Her energy was low, and a strange dizziness tugged at the edges of her vision. As the procession was about to begin, Charlotte's attendants made the final checks. Her dress was straightened once more, her gloves adjusted, and her hairpins carefully repositioned. Everything had to be perfect. Any flaw, no matter how small, could be noticed by the crowd, the cameras, or worse, the royal family itself. Charlotte nodded politely at the instructions, trying to steady herself. "I'm okay," she said again, though her voice was quieter this time, almost lost in the soft echoes of the palace. Outside, the royal guards continued their silent vigil. One guard, a young man who had recently joined the ceremonial unit, felt a strange sense of awe as he watched the young princess. He had trained for years for this moment, to stand perfectly still in front of royalty. But now, standing mere feet away from Charlotte, he felt an unexpected flutter of nervousness. His fellow guards remained stoic, unaware of his momentary lapse in focus. It was a world of discipline and perfection, yet even the most experienced could feel the weight of human emotion pressing in. The event began in earnest. Charlotte moved gracefully toward the main hall, her steps measured and precise. Cameras captured her every move, and the crowd outside the palace gates craned their necks for a glimpse of the young princess. She waved gently, her eyes meeting the faces of curious onlookers. Every gesture was deliberate, every expression carefully composed. She was aware of the public gaze, aware of the expectations placed upon her tiny shoulders. Yet, despite the outward calm, a strange feeling began to rise within her. Her heart beat faster, and a cold sweat formed along her hairline. The faint dizziness that she had tried to ignore became harder to dismiss. She placed a hand lightly on the arm of her attendant, seeking a small measure of support. I feel a little strange, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. The attendant nodded quickly, her eyes wide with concern. "Just take a deep breath, Your Highness. We are right here with you," she said soothingly. The royal guard nearest to her noticed nothing amiss. His duty was to stand firm, and he did so, eyes straight ahead, expression impassive. Training had taught him that any sign of weakness could be dangerous. Yet something in Charlotte's slight hesitation caught his attention, though he could not yet put it into words. He adjusted his stance slightly, a subtle shift that almost went unnoticed. The palace was a world of rituals and rules, and any disruption, however small, was significant. Charlotte continued to walk, moving past the rows of guards and attendants. The crowd outside could see her, though they had no idea of the internal struggle she faced. She smiled at them, but the effort required to maintain the smile grew heavier with every step. The faintest tinge of pain brushed against her abdomen, making her pause for a heartbeat. She glanced at her attendant again, and the attendant's worried eyes mirrored her own concern. As they approached the grand hall, Charlotte's hand trembled slightly. She steadied herself against the polished railing, trying to keep her composure. The air inside the hall was warmer, filled with the scent of flowers and polished wood. Guests had begun to take their seats, and the hum of quiet conversations filled the space. Everyone was focused on the ceremonial arrangements, unaware of the silent battle Charlotte was fighting just a few steps away. Her younger cousins ran past her again, laughing and carefree. Charlotte smiled weakly, wishing she could join them in their joy. For a brief moment, she imagined herself as just another child, free from the weight of expectation, free to play and laugh without concern. But reality pressed in swiftly, reminding her that she was a princess, watched by millions, and every move mattered. She swallowed hard, steadying her breath, and continued forward. The royal guard closest to her finally noticed the slight pallor of her face. It was a subtle change, almost invisible to anyone not trained to observe every detail. He shifted slightly, a sign of readiness, yet remained in perfect form. Discipline required that he not act unless there was clear cause. Still, the moment planted a seed of concern, an instinctual recognition that something might be wrong. Charlotte reached the center of the hall and paused for the ceremonial bow. Her movements were careful, deliberate, and precise. The crowd outside could see her small figure, dignified and poised. Inside, she felt a strange flutter in her chest, a reminder that beneath the porcelain exterior, she was still human, vulnerable, and real. Her attendant guided her gently, ensuring she remained upright and composed. As the ceremony began, Charlotte's mind wandered briefly. She thought of her family, the lessons she had been taught, and the responsibilities that came with her title. She thought of the royal guard, standing silently nearby, a figure of unwavering discipline. She thought of the day ahead, full of smiles, handshakes, and public appearances. And yet, amid all this, she felt a growing weariness, a warning that her body could not ignore much longer. The first part of the day passed without incident, at least outwardly. Charlotte maintained her composure, waved politely, and interacted with the guests. But inside, every step felt heavier, every gesture required more effort. Her close aide stayed by her side, ready to intervene if necessary, while the royal guard continued his silent watch, unaware of the delicate balance between duty and human frailty that he was witnessing. In these early hours, the stage was set. The grandeur of the palace, the perfection of the royal guards, and the composed exterior of Princess Charlotte created a picture of flawless royalty. But beneath this calm and beauty, the first signs of trouble were beginning to show, small and almost imperceptible. It was a quiet warning, a hint of the storm that was about to unfold. Charlotte paused for a moment near the hall entrance, taking a deep breath. She felt the faintest pinch of pain in her side and the dizziness she had tried to ignore all morning. She whispered to herself softly, almost inaudibly, "I hope I can make it through." The palace remained unaware, the crowd outside oblivious, and the royal guards continued their disciplined vigil. Everything appeared perfect, but the first cracks were beginning to show in the facade of calm. As the morning progressed, Charlotte continued to fulfill her royal duties, smiling, waving, and greeting her guests. Yet behind the scenes, a quiet tension built. Every careful step she took was a reminder that she was human, vulnerable to fatigue, illness, and unforeseen moments. The palace, with all its rules, traditions, and rituals, seemed suddenly vast and overwhelming, a stage on which even the smallest misstep could have consequences. And so the day moved forward, with the first hints of a crisis quietly forming, unnoticed by most, but felt keenly by the young princess and her attentive aide. The royal guard stood at attention, still frozen in their silent discipline, unaware that their training might soon be tested in ways they could never have imagined. The grand hall was filled with the soft murmur of voices, the shuffling of feet, and the occasional clink of fine china as attendants and guests moved gracefully through the palace. Princess Charlotte, despite her pale face and slight fatigue from the morning, continued to follow the ceremonial proceedings with careful attention. She smiled politely at dignitaries, waved to the guests, and nodded to her family members as she passed. On the surface, everything seemed normal, as if the morning's minor discomforts had disappeared. But inside Charlotte, the faint dizziness and weariness from earlier had grown stronger. Her legs felt heavier, and a strange warmth began to spread across her face. She pressed a gloved hand to her side and tried to steady her breathing, but the effort to maintain perfect composure was becoming almost unbearable. Her mind raced, trying to stay focused on the ceremony while also acknowledging the alarming signals her body was sending. Nearby, the royal guard who had been observing Charlotte since the morning noticed a subtle change. Though he had trained to remain still, to never show emotion, and to react only when necessary, he could see something was off. Her movements were a little slower, her hand trembled slightly, and the pale color in her cheeks was more pronounced. Still, he remained in place, unsure if it was his duty to intervene at this stage. Guards were taught to act with precision, not panic, and hesitation was often a matter of life and death in training. But this was different. It was something unexpected, something no training could have prepared him for. Charlotte tried to shake off the feeling. She reminded herself that she had to appear calm to fulfill her role in the event. She smiled at a guest who was bowing politely and waved her hand gently. "I'm fine," she told herself silently, but inside her body was no longer cooperating. Her vision blurred slightly at the edges, and a faint ringing sound filled her ears. The warmth she had felt moments ago began to intensify, spreading rapidly across her face and down her arms. Then, without warning, her knees buckled. Charlotte's gloved hands flailed slightly as she tried to regain her balance, but it was too late. In front of the crowd in the middle of the grand hall, Princess Charlotte collapsed. A collective gasp rose from the attendants, dignitaries, and family members. Some people rushed forward instinctively, while others froze in shock, unsure of how to react. The suddenness of it all left the room in a state of stunned silence. The royal guard nearest to her froze completely. He had been trained for emergencies, for moments when danger required immediate action, but this was not danger he had expected. This was the collapse of a young princess, bleeding and vulnerable before his eyes. His mind struggled to reconcile the reality in front of him with everything he had been taught. He wanted to move to help to react, but his body stayed rigid, locked in a moment of disbelief. Charlotte's face was pale, and a small stain of blood appeared on her dress. The attendants who were closest to her immediately sprang into action, surrounding her carefully to prevent further injury. One of them pressed a gentle hand to her forehead, another helped to support her back, and yet another called urgently for the palace doctor. The room was filled with a mixture of panic, concern, and confusion. Even as Charlotte lay there, semi-conscious, she murmured something that startled everyone. Her lips moved, forming words that no one expected to hear. She spoke the name of Camilla's son. The words were soft, almost whispered, but they carried a weight that made the attendants freeze in their tracks. Whispers ran through the hall. Why would the young princess, in her vulnerable state, mention that name? The questions and speculations swirled in the minds of those present, but there was no time to dwell on them. Immediate action was required. The royal guard, who had frozen at first, finally found his footing. The initial shock had passed, replaced by a focused urgency. He stepped forward carefully, ensuring that he did not disturb the attendants who were already helping Charlotte. Every movement was precise, controlled, and careful. He scanned the room quickly, assessing the situation. The crowd outside the immediate area was beginning to murmur, some guests standing in concern while others looked on in confusion. The hall that had been full of ceremony and calm now felt chaotic and tense. Charlotte's attendants worked quickly to stabilize her. One of them gently lifted her upper body while another attended to the minor bleeding. The palace doctor arrived moments later, carrying a small medical kit. He knelt beside Charlotte, speaking softly and reassuringly, trying to calm both the princess and the attendants. He checked her pulse, examined her condition, and gave instructions in a low voice to the staff around him. His calm presence helped to anchor the chaotic energy in the room, but the tension remained palpable. Charlotte's murmuring continued. She repeated the name again, as if it was on the tip of her tongue, something urgent that she needed to express even in her weakened state. The attendants exchanged worried glances, unsure whether it was a symptom of her condition or something else entirely. They whispered to each other, carefully debating whether they should mention it to higher-ranking officials. Meanwhile, the royal guard stayed close, ensuring that no one interfered with the medical care and that the princess remained safe. The crowd outside the immediate area of the collapse remained unaware of the full seriousness of the situation. From the balcony, some guests could see that something unusual was happening, but the details were unclear. Palace staff worked to shield the scene from public view, keeping the princess's dignity intact even as the emergency unfolded. The royal guard stood as a silent sentinel, his posture stiff, but his attention focused entirely on maintaining order and ensuring safety. As Charlotte began to regain some consciousness, her eyes fluttered open. She looked around, confused, and her gaze landed briefly on the royal guard. The moment was brief but intense. She could see the human uncertainty in his eyes, the conflict between duty and instinct. It was a rare glimpse behind the mask of discipline that all guards were trained to maintain. Charlotte's lips trembled slightly as she tried to speak, repeating the name of Camilla's son one more time. The attendants gently guided her to a more comfortable position, whispering reassurances and offering water. The royal guard, finally moving with purpose, assisted in creating space around Charlotte so the doctor and attendants could work effectively. His earlier hesitation had passed, replaced by a focused professionalism. He coordinated with other guards silently, ensuring that the area remained secure while the staff worked to address Charlotte's immediate needs. Every detail mattered: the placement of hands, the direction of attention, the calm presence of authority. Even in the midst of chaos, protocol and care were intertwined. As Charlotte's condition slowly stabilized, the immediate panic began to subside. The attendants guided her to a private chamber where she could rest safely. The royal guard remained outside, still in his role as protector, ensuring that no one disturbed the princess. The room, once filled with the sounds of the grand event, now felt strangely quiet. Only the soft voices of the attendants, the gentle steps of the doctor, and the distant murmurs of the guests echoed through the corridors. Questions lingered in everyone's mind. Why had Charlotte mentioned Camilla's son? Was it a symptom of the fainting spell or something more personal? The attendants exchanged glances, unsure how to interpret the words. Even the royal guard, disciplined and trained, could not help but wonder at the mysterious timing of her words. It was an event that defied easy explanation, a mix of human vulnerability and the complexities of royal life. Outside the private chamber, the palace staff worked quietly to maintain calm. Guests were gently redirected, the event's schedule was adjusted, and the media, if present, was kept away from the sensitive area. The royal guard, still standing at attention, felt the weight of his responsibility. His initial hesitation had been human, understandable, but he knew that every moment mattered when a member of the royal family was in distress. Charlotte rested quietly, her breathing slowly returning to normal. The bleeding was minor, but the incident had shaken everyone present. Attendants whispered softly, making sure she was comfortable, while the doctor continued to monitor her condition. The young princess's words echoed in their minds, a reminder that even in the most controlled and ceremonial of settings, the unexpected could happen. The royal guard finally allowed himself a subtle shift, a release of the tension that had built during the critical moments. His eyes remained vigilant, but he allowed a brief, almost imperceptible exhale. He had frozen when Charlotte collapsed, a moment of human hesitation that reminded him, and everyone present, that even the most trained individuals could be affected by shock. Yet he had acted when it mattered, and Charlotte was now safe. Even as calm slowly returned, the questions remained. Why did Charlotte say that name? How had her body betrayed her so suddenly in the middle of a ceremonial event? The palace, with its centuries of tradition, protocol, and control, had experienced a moment that no training could fully prepare it for. It was a stark reminder that beneath the elegance, discipline, and routine, the royal family were, after all, human. As the room settled, Charlotte's aide sat quietly beside her, holding her hand gently. "You're safe now, Your Highness," she whispered. Charlotte nodded faintly, still pale but beginning to regain her strength. Her lips moved slightly, and she murmured one last time, the mysterious name barely audible. The aide did not press her for explanation, understanding that the young princess needed time and space. Outside, the royal guard returned to his formal position, disciplined once again, though his mind replayed the events over and over. He thought of Charlotte, vulnerable and human, and of the unexpected words she had spoken. In that moment, he realized that duty and humanity could coexist, even in a world where perfection was demanded and expected. The grand hall, which had moments before been filled with ceremony and elegance, now held a quiet tension. The day would continue, but the incident could not be forgotten. It was a reminder that even in the most controlled environments, life could be unpredictable, fragile, and deeply human. And for Princess Charlotte, the collapse marked the beginning of a series of events that would challenge the calm, the protocol, and the carefully maintained image of royalty. After the shocking collapse of Princess Charlotte, the palace that had been alive with ceremony and elegance now seemed quieter, almost fragile. The immediate panic had subsided, and Charlotte was resting in a private chamber with her close aide and the palace doctor. But the ripple effects of the incident were only beginning to take shape. Every corner of Buckingham Palace seemed to hum with whispers and quiet tension, as attendants, guards, and family members tried to understand what had just happened. The young princess lay on a soft chaise, her delicate hands folded lightly across her lap. Her breathing had returned to a calm rhythm, but her face still held a faint pallor. The doctor had assured the staff that physically, Charlotte was recovering well. The faint bleeding was minor, and there were no serious injuries. Yet the mysterious words she had spoken, Camilla's son's name, lingered in everyone's minds like a puzzle they could not solve. Her aide sat closely, brushing a stray curl from Charlotte's forehead. "You are safe now, Your Highness," she whispered gently. Charlotte nodded faintly, though her thoughts seemed elsewhere. She pressed a hand to her temple as if trying to gather her scattered attention. The words she had murmured in her collapse felt strange even to her, almost as if they had come from somewhere deep within her mind rather than from conscious thought. She wondered silently why her lips had betrayed her, why that particular name had emerged at such a moment. Meanwhile, outside the chamber, the royal guard who had frozen during the collapse stood at attention, his posture stiff but his mind racing. He replayed the incident over and over, recalling the split second when he had been uncertain, when training and human instinct had collided. Guards were taught to be unwavering, to remain firm no matter what, but he had felt an unfamiliar hesitation, a moment of doubt. Now, observing from a distance, he realized that even the most disciplined could be affected by sudden, unexpected events. The palace staff quietly moved to manage the situation. Visitors were discreetly redirected, and the ceremony continued with careful modifications so that the collapse would not overshadow the day. Some guests were unaware of the severity of the incident, while others, especially those closest to the princess, whispered in concern. The royal family gathered in private, discussing how best to handle the delicate situation. Every word spoken, every action taken, had to preserve both Charlotte's well-being and the dignity of the monarchy. As the morning turned into afternoon, Charlotte slowly began to speak again. Her voice was soft but clear, carrying an unusual seriousness for someone so young. Why did I say his name?" she asked her aide, referring to Camilla's son. The question hung in the air, delicate yet weighty. Her aide, experienced and calm, chose her words carefully. "Sometimes, Your Highness, when our minds and bodies are under stress, we say things without fully understanding why. It does not always mean anything more than what you felt at that moment." Charlotte considered this answer, though her young mind could not completely accept it. There was a strange pull in her thoughts, a curiosity mixed with unease. Was it merely a product of her fainting, or had she revealed something deeper? She looked out the window briefly, watching the palace gardens where birds flew freely, their movements simple and natural. Charlotte longed for that freedom, a sense of life untouched by protocol and expectation. Inside the chamber, the palace doctor spoke softly, checking her pulse and noting her vitals. "Physically, you are fine now, princess. You had a fainting spell, likely due to exhaustion and stress. You need rest and calm, nothing more." Charlotte nodded, though her eyes betrayed a lingering worry. Even if her body was fine, her mind could not let go of the mystery that had emerged in her words. Outside the chamber, tension was building among the staff. The royal guard continued his silent vigil, but he could feel the undercurrents of speculation and concern spreading throughout the palace. Some attendants whispered about the incident, debating what had caused it. Others worried about how the story would be received if it reached the public. In a place where appearances were everything, even minor incidents could be magnified, misinterpreted, and spread quickly. Meanwhile, Charlotte's family gathered in a private sitting room, discussing the event quietly but with concern. They considered the possible causes: the stress of ceremonial duties, her health, or an unexpected emotional reaction. But the repetition of Camilla's son's name was puzzling. It was not something anyone expected, and it left them wondering about the inner thoughts of a child who was growing up amidst the pressures of royalty. The royal guard, still outside the chamber, overheard parts of these conversations. He had been trained to remain impartial, to not become involved in family or private matters, but he could not help sensing the undercurrent of curiosity and unease. In that moment, he realized that the palace was more than just a place of tradition. It was a living, breathing environment where emotions, secrecy, and duty intertwined. Even the smallest incident could ripple outward in ways no one could predict. As the afternoon passed, Charlotte slowly regained more strength. She sat up in her chaise, gently stretching her arms and legs. Her aide brought her a small cup of warm tea, which she sipped carefully. She listened to the soft rustling of the palace curtains in the breeze and the distant murmur of activity beyond the chamber walls. Despite the chaos of the morning, there was a sense of calm settling over her, a moment of quiet reflection amid the whirlwind of events. The young princess's thoughts wandered back to the name she had spoken. Why had it come to her at that precise moment? Was it simply random, or had her mind been trying to express something important? She could not answer these questions, but the curiosity lingered, an invisible thread tugging at her consciousness. It was a mystery she wanted to understand, though she knew she would need time and guidance. The royal guard, observing from his post, felt a deep respect for the princess. Despite her fainting, despite the chaos and uncertainty, she remained composed in her own way, recovering with courage and dignity. He thought about his own reaction, the hesitation he had felt, and realized that it was not a weakness but a reflection of the human heart. Even in a world governed by rules and protocol, human emotion could not be completely suppressed. As evening approached, Charlotte's chamber became quieter. The staff had ensured that the room was safe, comfortable, and peaceful. Soft light from the windows highlighted the gentle features of her face. She reflected on the events of the day, thinking about the responsibilities that awaited her as a young royal and the delicate balance between public appearance and private emotion. Her mind was calm now, but the memory of the collapse and the mysterious words she had spoken remained vivid. Her aide sat nearby, speaking softly about simple things, books, stories, and gentle reminders to rest. Charlotte listened, allowing herself to be distracted from her thoughts. Yet she could not completely shake the feeling that the name she had said carried meaning, a whisper of something she had not yet understood. She pressed her hands together lightly, as if holding an invisible puzzle that needed solving. The palace staff continued to manage the aftermath discreetly. Guards patrolled the corridors, ensuring that the area remained secure. Attendants checked on Charlotte periodically, offering reassurance and maintaining calm. In private corners, discussions unfolded quietly among staff and family members about what had happened and what it might mean. Yet no one could fully explain the unexpected moment, and the questions remained unanswered. Charlotte's recovery was steady. She moved slowly around the chamber, testing her strength, and found that she could walk without support. Her breathing was normal, and her face regained a faint glow. Yet the mental and emotional weight of the incident was more difficult to address. She thought about her responsibilities, her public role, and the reality that even a small lapse could have far-reaching consequences in a world where appearances mattered deeply. The royal guard reflected on the day as well. Standing silently, he understood that duty was not just about following orders or maintaining composure. It was about awareness, sensitivity, and readiness for the unexpected. He realized that the collapse of Princess Charlotte had tested more than just protocol. It had tested patience, empathy, and the human ability to respond under pressure. Even as the palace returned to a semblance of normalcy, the questions surrounding the mysterious name persisted. Charlotte herself pondered it quietly, understanding that the answer might not come quickly. It was a moment that would stay with her, a reminder that even in the carefully structured world of royalty, life could surprise, challenge, and teach lessons in unexpected ways. The evening grew darker, and the soft glow of lamps illuminated the palace corridors. Charlotte rested once more on her chaise, her hands folded, her thoughts deep and reflective. The royal guard continued his post outside, disciplined but quietly thoughtful. He had witnessed a moment that was rare, almost human in its unpredictability, and it left him with a renewed understanding of the delicate balance between duty and humanity. And so, the day that began with ceremony and routine ended with a quiet tension, a sense of mystery, and an understanding that even the most controlled environments were vulnerable to sudden, unexpected events. For Princess Charlotte, it was a lesson in the fragility of life, the strength of recovery, and the curiosity that comes when one encounters the unknown. For the royal guard, it was a reminder that discipline must always coexist with awareness, empathy, and a readiness to act when the moment demands it. The palace, centuries old and steeped in tradition, had witnessed countless events, both grand and tragic. Yet this day, marked by a fainting young princess and a name spoken unexpectedly, would remain in memory. A quiet but powerful reminder that beneath the layers of protocol, ceremony, and expectation, life was unpredictable, fragile, and deeply human. The day following Princess Charlotte's collapse began quietly in Buckingham Palace. The grand halls and corridors, normally bustling with attendants and ceremonial preparations, were unusually calm. Staff moved gently, speaking in hushed tones, aware of the delicate situation. Charlotte remained in her private chamber, resting on a soft chaise while her close aide sat nearby, offering quiet support and guidance. Though her body had begun to recover, her mind remained restless, replaying the events of the previous day. Charlotte thought deeply about the name that had slipped from her lips during her fainting spell. It had startled everyone at the time, and even now she could not understand why it had come out. Camilla's son was someone she knew in passing, part of the extended royal family, yet for some reason his name had emerged from her unconscious state. She wondered if it was connected to a memory, a dream, or simply the stress of the day. The mystery weighed on her young mind, stirring curiosity and unease. Her aide noticed the distant look in Charlotte's eyes. "You have been quiet, Your Highness," she said softly. "Do you want to talk about it?" Charlotte shook her head lightly. "I don't know yet," she admitted. "I just keep thinking about why I said that name." The aide nodded, understanding that some things needed time to be understood. She gently reminded Charlotte to focus on rest, assuring her that the palace staff and the doctor were monitoring her closely. Outside the chamber, the royal guard continued his silent vigilance. He had spent the previous day replaying the incident over and over in his mind. The moment when he had frozen, unsure how to react, stayed with him. Guards were trained to act quickly and decisively, but witnessing a young princess collapse and speak unexpectedly had tested both his discipline and his instincts. Now, as he watched over the chamber, he understood that duty was not just about rigid rules. It was also about awareness, compassion, and readiness for the unexpected. The palace doctor visited Charlotte several times that morning, checking her pulse, observing her movements, and asking gentle questions about how she felt. "You are physically well now, Princess," he said kindly. The fainting was likely caused by a combination of fatigue, mild dehydration, and stress. "It is important that you rest and eat properly." Charlotte nodded, absorbing the information. She had always known that her health was closely watched, but the incident had reminded her just how fragile the human body could be, even for a princess surrounded by care and protection. Word of the collapse had spread quietly within the palace, though the public was kept unaware. Staff whispered in private corners, speculating about what had happened and why. Some wondered if it had been purely a physical reaction, while others were intrigued by the mysterious name Charlotte had spoken. Even among the family, subtle curiosity mixed with concern. Everyone wanted to ensure Charlotte was safe, but the incident also sparked questions about her emotional state and the pressures she faced as a young member of the royal family. Charlotte's recovery continued steadily. She moved slowly around the room, testing her strength and practicing small gestures of composure. Her aide encouraged her gently, reminding her that it was okay to take things slowly and that the palace staff would handle all matters outside the chamber. Despite her improved physical condition, Charlotte's mind remained preoccupied. She thought about the name, about the reactions of the people around her, and about the complexity of her own feelings. It was a lot for someone so young to process. The royal guard observed the princess from a respectful distance, still maintaining his role as protector. He noticed her thoughtful expressions, the way she paused often as if weighing her own thoughts. He admired her resilience, her ability to recover quickly despite the shock of the previous day. Yet, he also understood that recovery was not only physical, it was emotional and mental as well. The princess needed time, understanding, and the quiet support of those around her. Later in the day, members of the royal family visited Charlotte privately. They approached gently, speaking softly, aware of the delicate state she was in. Their questions were kind but careful, focused on her well-being rather than the incident itself. Charlotte appreciated their concern, though she still felt the lingering tension of the event. She realized that being part of the royal family came with responsibilities and scrutiny, and even minor incidents could create waves of curiosity and speculation. During this quiet time, Charlotte reflected on the nature of her role. She understood that appearances mattered deeply in her world, but she also recognized the importance of her own feelings and experiences. The collapse had been a stark reminder that, despite all the training, protocol, and protection, she was human. Vulnerable moments were natural, and acknowledging them did not diminish her dignity. It enhanced her understanding of herself. The palace staff continued their careful monitoring. Attendants checked on her regularly, bringing tea, water, and light snacks. They ensured the room was calm and comfortable, free from distractions that might stress her further. The royal guard remained vigilant, a steady presence outside the chamber. His experience from the previous day had deepened his understanding of duty. He realized that protection was not only about physical defense, but also about emotional and psychological support. As evening approached, Charlotte sat by the window, watching the sun cast long shadows across the palace gardens. The sight of birds flying freely and the gentle sway of trees in the breeze brought her a sense of peace. She reflected on the events of the past day, thinking about the collapse, the mysterious name, and the reactions of those around her. Though she did not yet have answers, she felt a quiet determination to understand herself and her feelings more deeply. Her aide joined her by the window, sitting silently for a moment before speaking. "The palace can be overwhelming, Your Highness," she said softly. "Even the most careful planning cannot prevent unexpected moments. What matters is how you respond, how you care for yourself, and how you allow others to support you." Charlotte listened, appreciating the wisdom in her words. She realized that seeking help and allowing others to guide her was not a weakness, but a sign of strength and maturity. Later, Charlotte's family gathered again to discuss the incident privately. They spoke about how to support her emotionally and how to manage public appearances while respecting her recovery. The mysterious repetition of Camilla's son's name was still a topic of quiet curiosity, but they chose not to dwell on it publicly. Instead, the focus remained on Charlotte's health, well-being, and emotional stability. The family understood that the princess's recovery was more important than speculation or conjecture. The royal guard reflected on the day from his post outside Charlotte's chamber. He had witnessed a rare glimpse into the vulnerability and humanity of a young royal. His training had taught him discipline, composure, and procedure, but he realized that compassion, patience, and empathy were equally important. The princess's fainting had reminded him that even the most carefully controlled environments could experience unexpected moments that tested both body and spirit. Throughout the evening, Charlotte continued to recover slowly. She moved about her chamber, practiced small gestures of composure, and allowed herself to think freely without the weight of ceremony pressing upon her. Her thoughts returned occasionally to the mysterious name, but she approached it with curiosity rather than fear. She knew that understanding her own feelings and reactions was a journey, one that required patience and self-reflection. By nightfall, the palace had returned to a sense of quiet routine. Guards patrolled the halls, staff moved efficiently but quietly, and Charlotte rested comfortably in her chamber. The incident, though unusual, had been managed with care, professionalism, and empathy. Everyone involved, family, staff, and the royal guard, had acted with respect for the princess's dignity, ensuring her safety and privacy above all else. As Charlotte settled into a peaceful rest, she reflected on the lessons of the day. She understood that life, even within the palace walls, could be unpredictable. Moments of weakness, vulnerability, and confusion were natural, and acknowledging them was part of growing up. She felt a renewed sense of determination to understand herself, to trust those around her, and to navigate the complexities of her role with grace and honesty. The royal guard, standing silently outside her chamber, felt a deep sense of respect and responsibility. He had witnessed the delicate balance between duty and humanity, and he understood that both were essential. The events of the past day had reminded him that protection was not only physical but also emotional, requiring awareness, empathy, and careful judgment. In the quiet of the evening, the palace seemed to breathe with a gentle calm. The grandeur of its architecture, the richness of its history, and the presence of its people created a sense of continuity and stability. Yet beneath the surface, the events surrounding Charlotte's collapse would remain a quiet memory, a reminder of the fragility of life, the unpredictability of human emotion, and the importance of care, attention, and understanding. Charlotte drifted into a gentle sleep, her mind still pondering the mysterious name and the lessons she had learned. She felt safe, supported, and increasingly confident in her ability to navigate both the privileges and challenges of her royal life. Outside, the royal guard remained vigilant, a steady presence ensuring that the young princess could rest undisturbed, a reminder that duty and humanity could coexist even in the most extraordinary of circumstances. The day had ended not with spectacle, ceremony, or grandeur, but with quiet reflection, care, and the subtle understanding that life, even for a princess, was unpredictable, human, and deeply meaningful. And in this quiet, Charlotte found a sense of peace, strength, and awareness that would guide her in the days to come.